The evening lights inside the Golden Spoon restaurant glowed softly like warm candles scattered across the hall. Families talked over gentle music, and the sound of cutlery touching plates created a peaceful rhythm. In the middle section near a long row of flowers sat Mira and her husband Ryan. It was their 3rd wedding anniversary, and Mira had chosen this place because it was calm and full of memories. They had celebrated their 1st anniversary here, and she hoped tonight would feel just as meaningful. Mira wore a simple blue dress that reflected the light in a graceful way. Her hair was tied neatly, and she wore a soft smile that came from hope. Ryan sat across from her in a crisp white shirt and dark jacket. His posture was perfect, but his eyes were fixed on his phone. Mira kept waiting for him to look at her, but he only nodded occasionally without really listening to anything she said. She tried asking about his day and about work, but his replies were short and distracted. Mira looked at the other couples around them laughing and sharing stories. She felt a small ache inside, but she kept her smile steady. She believed in patience. She believed in gentle effort. She believed this evening could still turn into something warm. She had even ordered a slice of their favorite chocolate cake for the end of the meal as a surprise. When the waiter approached with the dessert plate, Mira sat up a little straighter. He placed the slice gently between them with a spark of happiness in his expression. He said he remembered serving them 2 years ago when they had celebrated here for the first time. Mira smiled gratefully and thanked him. She hoped Ryan would feel the moment too, but he only offered a quick glance before focusing on his phone again. Then the waiter placed the bill at the center of the table. Mira waited to see if Ryan would reach for it, but he did not move. After a long pause, he pushed the small folder toward her. His expression changed from neutral to cold. Mira blinked in confusion because they had always shared expenses in a balanced way. She reached for the bill and looked at him gently. Before she could ask anything, he sighed loudly, as if he was tired of something inside his own mind. He told her she should pay because she earned enough, and he was tired of being the one who handled everything. Mira felt a small sting in her chest. She tried to remind him softly that she had paid for their small weekend trip last week. She said they always supported each other. Her tone was kind, but Ryan saw it as a challenge. His eyes narrowed. His shoulders tightened. His voice grew sharper. He said she always expected him to step forward, and he was done with that. Mira sat still, trying to understand why he was upset. Nothing about the evening had suggested tension. She wondered if something had happened earlier in his day. She wondered if he was stressed or tired. She wondered how a gentle evening had turned into this moment of frost. The restaurant grew quiet around them. A few guests sensed tension at their table. A server passing by slowed his steps. Myra's hands shook slightly, but she hid them beneath the edge of the table. She tried to keep the evening from falling apart. She told him they could talk calmly. She told him she just wanted to understand. She kept her words soft because she believed softness could ease storms. But Ryan suddenly stood up from his chair. His movement was sharp and loud enough to turn heads. He lifted the dessert plate from the table. Mira had no time to react before he swung it toward her. The slice of chocolate cake struck her directly across the cheek and splattered across her dress. Thick cream dripped from her chin. The sound was sharp. The entire restaurant froze. Gasps echoed from nearby tables. A child dropped his spoon. An elderly couple stared in disbelief. The waiter who had brought the cake stood frozen with a shocked expression. Mira sat perfectly still. Time felt suspended. She felt the coolness of the cream sliding down her skin. She felt her heart beating fast inside her chest. She felt the sudden change in air as Ryan walked away without hesitation. He did not look at her. He did not pause. He pushed the restaurant door open and stepped into the street as if nothing had happened. For a long moment Mira did not move. She sat there with the cake on her face and dress while the music continued to play faintly in the background. She felt every pair of eyes on her, yet she did not feel embarrassed. She felt disconnected from the place, like she was watching from outside her own body. Slowly she lifted a napkin from the table and wiped her face with steady, deliberate movements. Her hands trembled, but her breath was even. The waiter came to her side with a gentle voice. He asked if she was all right. Several guests looked ready to stand up and help. A woman from the corner table approached with a small towel. Mira thanked them all with soft words. She did not want a scene. She did not want pity. She only wanted to find her center again. She stood up carefully, holding her bag close so no one would see her shaking fingers. She stepped outside the restaurant into the open night air. The breeze touched her skin and felt strangely comforting. She looked down at her stained dress. The blue fabric now carried a mark of the moment that had changed something deep inside her. She closed her eyes and took a long breath. When she opened them again, there was no fear. There was only clarity. She began walking toward home. Each step felt slow but steady. She did not hurry. She did not slump. She walked with quiet dignity. The street was calm. A few cars passed by. The lights from shop windows reflected gently on the pavement. Mira held her head high even though her dress still carried the traces of the evening. People looked at her with concern, but she smiled kindly at anyone who approached. Inside her mind, memories resurfaced. She remembered the early days of her marriage when everything felt full of promise. Ryan had once been thoughtful. He had once brought her tea when she was tired. He had once written her a small note saying he admired her kindness. But over the years his tone had changed. He had grown distant. He had started speaking in short, sharp phrases. He had begun blaming her for small things. The change had been slow, but Mira had felt it like a quiet tightening in the air. Tonight had shown the full truth. There was no misunderstanding. There was no stress from work. There was no small frustration. The cake on her face had revealed everything he had allowed himself to become. Mira reached the street corner near their home. She paused under a tall street lamp. The light shone across her stained dress and created a small circle of brightness around her. She felt her heartbeat settle. She felt her breathing return to its natural rhythm. She knew something inside her had shifted. She could not return to her home as if nothing had happened. She could not pretend this moment was small. She could not carry the silence any longer. She turned and walked past their house instead of entering it. She walked toward a small park nearby where she used to sit when she needed time to think. She chose a bench under a large tree. The leaves rustled softly above her. Children had once played here earlier in the afternoon, but now the park was empty. Mira sat quietly with her hands in her lap. She looked up at the night sky. She felt no anger. She felt no desire for confrontation. She only felt the weight of a decision forming with gentle certainty. She realized she had stayed in a shrinking space for too long. She realized she had allowed her voice to remain small. She realized she deserved a life where respect shaped every conversation. She stayed in the park for many minutes, listening to the wind move through the branches. Each sound felt like a reminder that she still had strength. She still had choice. She still had a future she could shape with her own hands. When she finally stood up, she felt lighter than she had in months. The direction ahead of her was clear. She walked toward the next street, her steps steady and calm. The night around her seemed larger, as if it was opening a path she had never seen before. Mira did not know where the next hours would lead. She did not know how Ryan would react when he realized she had not returned home. But she knew one thing for certain. The moment the cake hit her face was not the end of her dignity. It was the beginning of her awakening. Tonight would become the turning point no one expected. And her next move would change everything about the life she once accepted without question. When Mira left the park and stepped onto the quiet street, the night felt softer around her. The wind carried the smell of jasmine from a nearby garden. Streetlights glowed gently across the pavement. Mira walked slowly toward the direction of her home, but she did not enter the street where the house stood. Instead, she stopped at the corner and looked at it from a distance. The windows were dark except for one faint light in the living room. She knew Ryan was there. She knew he would expect her to return, eventually. But she felt a steady calm inside that told her she was not ready to walk through that door again. She stood beneath the street lamp with her bag in her hand. Her dress still held stains from the chocolate cake, but the stains no longer felt heavy. They felt like symbols that told a story she was no longer afraid to face. She lifted her chin gently, breathing with purpose. She walked away from the house and turned toward the small road that led to the bus stop. The bus stop had a single metal bench and a dim light bulb flickering softly above it. Mira sat there and watched the empty road. She had no plan yet. No destination. Her heart felt bruised, but her mind felt clear. She wanted space. She wanted distance. She wanted time to think without the weight of expectation. As she sat quietly, a memory rose inside her mind. It was of her mother speaking to her many years ago after a difficult day at school. Her mother had taken her hands and said that people will treat you according to the strength they believe you hold. If they think you are weak, they act without care. But if you show quiet strength, you change the way they see you. Mira had never forgotten those words. Tonight they echoed inside her soul with new meaning. A soft sound of approaching footsteps made her lift her head. A woman wearing a long coat walked toward the bench. She had been at the restaurant earlier. Her face was full of concern as she stopped near Mira. She said she had followed her because she was worried. She introduced herself as Nadia and explained that she had witnessed the entire scene at the restaurant. She said she wanted to know if Mira had someone to talk to or somewhere safe to go. Mira felt touched by the kindness. She nodded and told Nadia she was all right. She explained very gently that she needed some time alone. Nadia hesitated but respected her space. She offered her phone number in case Mira ever needed help and then walked away with a supportive smile. Mira tucked the number into her bag, appreciating the warmth of a stranger on such a heavy night. When the next bus arrived, Mira stepped inside. Only 2 other people were seated at the back, reading quietly. Mira chose a seat near the window. The city passed by slowly as the bus moved. Lights from shops flickered across her reflection in the glass. She watched herself with curiosity. She no longer looked like a woman covered in cake. She looked like someone stepping into a new truth. As the bus moved further, Mira realized she should not wander without direction. She decided to go to her friend Alma's apartment. Almas had always been supportive. She lived in a calm building not far from the northern side of the city. Mira pressed the bell when the bus approached the stop and stepped outside with steady steps. The streets near Alma's apartment were quiet at this hour. Tall trees lined the sidewalks and cast long shadows on the ground. Mira walked up the small staircase and knocked gently on the door. After a moment, Almas opened it with sleepy eyes, but when she saw Mira, her expression turned into surprise and then concern. She pulled her inside without asking anything. When Mira explained everything that had happened, Almas listened without interrupting. Her face moved from shock to sadness and then to a protective calm. She guided Mira to sit on the couch and made her a warm cup of tea. Mira held the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth ease some of the ache inside her chest. Almas told her she could stay as long as she wanted. She said Mira did not need to make any decisions that night. She said Mira deserved peace. Mira felt grateful. She showered and changed into a simple outfit that Almas offered. When she looked at her stained dress, she felt no shame. She folded it carefully and placed it inside her bag as a reminder of the moment she had found her courage. She went to sleep in the small guest room with quiet thoughts. She fell asleep faster than she expected because her mind felt lighter than it had in a long time. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. Mira woke to the smell of tea and bread. Almas knocked on the door and asked if she was ready to talk. Mira nodded and joined her at the dining table. The morning felt new and fresh. Mira spoke slowly about her marriage and how things had changed over the years. She explained how the small dismissive words had grown into larger moments of disrespect. She explained how she had lost her sense of self without realizing it. Almas listened with compassion. She reminded Mira that love without respect can never remain whole. She said sometimes people change and sometimes couples grow apart, but no one deserves humiliation. Mira felt tears form, but they did not fall. Instead, a soft strength rose inside her. She realized she had held everything inside for too long. After breakfast, Mira opened her small bag and pulled out a folder she had kept with her for months. Inside were documents she had quietly prepared. She had done this back when she had first noticed the shift in Ryan. She had not hoped for separation, but she had wanted safety. She had copies of their shared accounts. She had a list of her own savings. She had notes from a conversation with a lawyer she had met through her workplace. She had kept all of this hidden, hoping she would never need it. But now the folder felt like a step she was ready to take. She called the lawyer and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. The lawyer remembered her and spoke kindly. Mira felt a sense of control that she had not felt in years. She felt steady. She felt grown. She felt like she was holding her own life in her hands instead of hoping someone else would treat it well. Meanwhile at home, Ryan woke up and noticed Mira was not there. He checked the bathroom, then the bedroom, then the living room. When he found her phone on the table, he felt a strange confusion. He called her name in each room. He looked out the window, expecting her to walk in any moment. But nothing happened. His confusion grew into frustration. He tried calling her number, but the phone simply vibrated on the table. He stepped outside thinking maybe she had gone for a walk, but she was nowhere to be seen. A neighbor who had seen her passing by the night before said she looked calm and determined. Ryan felt something sink inside him when he heard that. He walked back inside the house feeling uneasy. He looked around the kitchen and something felt different. He noticed the folded napkin with cake remains on the edge of the sink. He remembered the restaurant. He remembered the moment. He remembered the look on Myra's face before he left. For the first time his actions did not feel powerful. They felt cruel. They felt small. He sat on the sofa with a heavy breath. He realized he had not just lost patience. He had lost something far more important. Back at Alma's place, Mira dressed neatly and prepared for her meeting. She felt nervous but strong. When she arrived at the lawyer's office, she explained everything calmly. The lawyer listened and guided her through each step she could take to protect herself legally and financially. Mira answered each question with clarity. She signed a few documents that gave her independence and protected her savings. When she left the office, she felt taller than before. She walked down the steps with a soft but firm expression. She passed shops and cafes. People around her talked and laughed, but Mira moved through them with a quiet, steady presence. She felt like she had stepped into a new version of herself. In the afternoon, she returned to Alma's apartment. They sat together and talked about next steps. Mira knew she needed to make some decisions soon, but she did not feel rushed. She knew she needed to think carefully. She knew she needed to rebuild her sense of self before anything else. By evening, news began to circulate on social media. Someone from the restaurant had recorded the moment the cake hit her face. They had not captured her reaction fully, but they had captured the sharp contrast between her calm presence and Ryan's harsh action. The video spread quickly. People began to comment about strength and dignity. No one knew Mira personally, but many wrote messages about the courage it took to sit quietly instead of responding with anger. Mira found out through Almas, who showed her the video gently. Mira watched herself sitting in the restaurant with cake on her face. She did not feel shame. She felt a strange sense of recognition. That moment had already transformed her, and now the world had seen the exact second her life had shifted. As night approached, Mira and Almas sat on the balcony talking about hope, dignity, and new beginnings. Mira looked at the soft lights across the city and felt something rising inside her. It was not revenge. It was not bitterness. It was self-respect. It was clarity. It was the beginning of something new. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She still did not know what tomorrow would bring. She still did not know how Ryan would react when he realized the depth of her decision. She still did not know what path her life would take now. But she knew one thing with certainty. She would not go back to the life she had before. Her heart had awakened. Her silence had found its voice. Her strength had found its shape. And for the first time in a long time she felt free. The next morning sunlight entered Alma's apartment with a warm glow. It settled on the walls and touched the small plants near the window. Mira woke slowly and sat up on the edge of the bed. She felt a calm she had not known in a long time. Her mind felt clearer than the day before and her heart felt steady. She went to the kitchen where Almas was making tea. The smell filled the room gently. Almas smiled when she saw Mira and asked if she had slept well. Mira nodded yes and thanked her again for providing support. They sat at the table drinking tea. Birds sang outside on a nearby tree, and their soft voices filled the silence between the two friends. It felt peaceful. Mira closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. She knew today would bring new challenges. She knew she would need to face things she had avoided for too long. But she was no longer afraid of facing them. Meanwhile at home Ryan paced across the living room with restless steps. His mind had been racing since dawn. He had checked the rooms again. He had called Myra's number again even though the phone lay on the table. He had walked outside and searched the street. He had even gone to the park, but she was nowhere to be found. When he returned he sat on the sofa and buried his face in his hands. The truth began to settle on him slowly and painfully. He had pushed her too far. As the morning passed, the video from the restaurant continued to spread. People in town recognized both Mira and Ryan. Many had seen them together over the years. They remembered the days when they had looked happy. Now they saw a different story. Some called it disappointment. Some called it sadness. Some said Mira had shown grace when others would have reacted in anger. The opinions spread through markets, through offices, through phone calls. Ryan heard them when he stepped outside for fresh air. The whispers followed him like shadows. He realized the damage was not just about the embarrassment. It was about who he had become. He had allowed frustration to control him. He had allowed pride to guide his actions. He had allowed a moment of anger to break the trust of someone who had loved him with sincerity. He returned home and sat in silence. The house that once felt safe now felt empty and cold. Back at Alma's apartment, Mira received a message from the lawyer. They were ready to finalize the documents that would give her complete independence. She looked at the message for a while before replying. She felt no rush, but she knew she had started a journey she needed to complete. She told Almas about the message, and her friend encouraged her with a warm smile. Mira prepared herself and left the apartment with calm steps. The lawyer's office was bright and professional. Papers were arranged neatly on the table. When Mira entered, she felt a sense of control. The lawyer explained everything clearly. Mira listened carefully and signed each document with steady hands. When she finished, she felt as if a weight had lifted from her shoulders. She thanked the lawyer and stepped outside into the afternoon sun. She walked slowly toward a small cafe nearby. She sat by the window and watched people passing by. Some were rushing to work. Some were walking with children. Some were lost in their own thoughts. Mira sipped her tea and thought about her own life. She wondered how she had allowed herself to become so quiet. She wondered why she had stayed silent for so long. Yet she did not blame herself. She understood now that healing takes time. Courage grows slowly until it suddenly steps forward. As she sat thinking, a young woman approached her table. The woman recognized her from the video. She asked if she could speak to her for a moment. Mira nodded kindly. The woman told her she admired her calm reaction and said it had inspired her to leave a harmful situation in her own life. Mira listened with surprised eyes. She had not expected her private moment to reach someone else in such a deep way. She offered encouraging words and wished the woman strength. When the woman left, Mira felt touched. She realized her quiet strength had already begun to reach others. Later that afternoon Mira returned to Almas' apartment. Almas welcomed her with open arms and asked how the meeting went. Mira explained everything with a gentle smile. They sat together for a while talking about the future. Mira said she wanted to find a new job soon and create her own peaceful space. She wanted a place that reflected her growth. A place where she could wake up and breathe without tension. Almas supported every idea and said she would help Mira search for a comfortable place to rent. As evening approached, Mira stepped out to take a short walk alone. The sky was turning golden. The air held a soft warmth. Birds moved across the sky in rhythmic patterns. Mira walked slowly, letting the breeze touch her face. She reached a quiet part of town where small shops sold flowers, fruits, and handmade crafts. She stopped at a flower shop and looked at the fresh lilies arranged in a vase. Lilies had always been her favorite. They symbolized renewal and purity. She bought a small bunch and held them gently as she walked back toward the apartment. At the same time, Ryan sat on the edge of the bed in their home, staring at the letter Mira had left on the table. He had read it many times, but the words pressed deeper each time. She had written calmly and clearly. She had written that respect was the foundation of their marriage, and without it she could no longer stay. She had explained that her decision was not made out of anger but out of self-respect. Ryan felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had always believed Mira would forgive him no matter what. He had believed she would always remain, even when he was careless. Now he understood that her patience had been strength, not weakness. He stood up suddenly with the desire to find her and apologize. He wanted to explain that he had lost control and that he regretted everything. He wanted to tell her he valued her more than his pride. He put on his jacket and stepped outside. He did not know exactly where she might be, but he decided to try asking her relatives and her close friends. When he arrived at the home of one of Myra's relatives, he received a cold welcome. They knew what had happened. They had seen the video. They told him firmly that Mira needed space and that disturbing her now would not help. Ryan felt regret twist inside him. He went to another relative who told him she was safe and asked him to leave. None of them told him where she was staying. They had chosen to protect her. As night settled, Mira returned to the apartment with the lilies in her hand. She placed them in a small glass bottle near the window. Their fragrance filled the room with gentle sweetness. She sat on the sofa with Almas and shared her thoughts. She wondered if she should meet Ryan one last time to close the chapter. She wondered if she needed closure. Almas told her that the choice was hers alone and she should do whatever brought peace to her heart. The following morning Mira decided she would speak to him, but only to finish the story with dignity. She wanted no anger. She wanted no argument. She wanted a quiet and respectful end. She called Ryan using Almas' phone and told him she would meet him at a public garden near the library at noon. Her voice was steady. Ryan agreed immediately and felt a mix of hope and fear. When Mira arrived at the garden, she chose a bench under a tall tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating soft moving patterns on the ground. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, waiting calmly. Ryan arrived a few minutes later. He walked toward her slowly. His shoulders were lowered and his eyes held regret. He sat on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a moment neither of them spoke. The sound of leaves rustling filled the silence. Mira looked at him with gentle dignity. Ryan finally spoke. He said he was sorry. He said he had behaved without thinking. He said he had allowed stress to cloud his judgment. He said he had hurt the person who had stood by his side with patience for years. His voice trembled as he spoke. Mira listened without interrupting. She felt no anger now. She felt only understanding and acceptance of the truth. When he finished, she spoke softly. She said she appreciated his apology. She said she had forgiven him because forgiveness was for her own peace. But she also said she could not return to a place where her dignity was compromised. She said she had found a quiet strength inside herself and she needed to follow it. Ryan lowered his head and nodded. He understood her words. He knew she was not speaking out of emotion. She was speaking from clarity. He told her he respected her decision even though it hurt him. He said he hoped she would find happiness and peace. Mira wished him growth and healing. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mira stood up. She gave him a soft farewell and walked away with steady steps. She did not look back. The sunlight touched her shoulders as she walked down the garden path. Ryan watched her until she disappeared among the trees. He wiped his eyes and stayed seated for a long time thinking about the changes he needed to make in his own life. Mira returned to Alma's apartment feeling light. She felt a sense of completion. She felt ready to build a new future. Over the next few weeks she found a small apartment near her workplace. She decorated it with simple furniture and fresh flowers. She placed the lilies she bought on her first free day in a vase by the window. She began to smile more each morning, and her laughter returned slowly. People from her community continued to admire her strength. Some reached out for guidance. Some simply offered kind words. Mira responded with warmth and compassion. She had learned that a quiet heart can carry great power. She had learned that dignity shines brightest in moments of pain. She had learned that choosing oneself is not selfish. It is necessary. One day she stood on her balcony watching the sunset. The sky was orange and soft. Birds flew across the horizon. Mira placed her hand on the railing and felt the gentle breeze touch her face. She thought about her journey. She thought about the night at the restaurant. She thought about how far she had come since then. She felt no sadness when she remembered the past. She felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned. She felt pride in the strength she had discovered. She felt hope for the future that lay ahead. Her life had changed in a way no one expected. The moment that could have broken her had instead awakened her. She had risen with grace. She had chosen respect. She had stepped into a new chapter with courage. And as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, Mira smiled with deep peace, knowing she had not only survived but transformed.